So Connor Bean and I just finished playing a round of disc golf. If you've never played disc golf before, it's a lot of fun. You definitely should try it. But I found a treasure trove while walking around in the woods throwing frisbees with my boy. Let's jump into it. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. My name is Garmin, that is Connor, and this is the Storycraft Society. And you're probably wondering what the treasure trove that I spoke of was. So we're gonna dive down into my bag here, and I will pull out bark. Now, I've seen a lot of people talk about this stuff online. What they say is that this is the perfect rock substitute for when you're making rocks for your tabletop gaming scatter terrain. I'm gonna compare this to my other types of rocks that I've made for tabletop gaming. We're gonna see which one is the easiest, which one comes out the best. But already I can tell you that just looking at this now, this looks really good already. I'm excited. So here on the channel, I have taken the opportunity to make rocks a bunch of different ways. Arguably the only way that I haven't is just by getting a rock out of the yard and putting it onto my table. But that's not the point. The point is we're making stuff out of stuff that isn't stuff. So the first way that I made rocks on the channel was I used XPS foam. You just cut out rocky looking shapes, you texture it with a tinfoil ball, and then paint it up. Looks pretty good, although super lightweight, so if you bump it, it's easy to knock these all over the table. The next way that I showed how to do it was to use Plaster and Woodland Scenics rock molds. Now these look really good. You just mix up the plaster with water and then pour it into the molds, let the molds dry, and then you have these awesome pieces of plaster that really do genuinely look like rocks. They're not that heavy, which is good, although I guess that really depends on what type of plaster you use. The problem is that making them takes time, so you have to pour the plaster and put them into the mold and then let the mold sit for a long time. So this takes a long time to make for what should be a very simple little project. The final one that I did is actually my least favorite of the bunch. I used this spray can crafting foam stuff that it expands and bubbles out and looks like this. I give this a not great. It's okay. It was a fun product to try to use once. Real talk, I will probably never, ever use it again for this purpose, but I did end up with a piece of terrain from it, and from a distance it looks fine, but anything farther than like table distance does not look great. So to get the bark ready for crafting, it said online that I should bake it in an oven at 200 degrees Fahrenheit for about 15 to 20 minutes. So that is exactly what we're doing, but we are going to wait for that to get done. While I'm doing that, I'm gonna go ahead and make a base out of MDF. This is just really simple. Just cut it to shape and round all the edges off so that they sit flush on the table. My favorite thing about doing scatter terrain that is this size is how quick it is to make. So obviously I have my base here and I have my piece of bark that's gonna end up being my rock. It's gonna glue on just like that. So the first thing that we need to do to get this thing on there is I pulled out my hot glue gun set to the hottest temperature setting, and I'm just going to pump a bunch of hot glue onto here and glue that down. Easy as that. The next step is not absolutely necessary, but sometimes the hot glue can be a little bit finicky. So what I like to do is break out my super glue. In this case, I'm going to be using Gorilla Gel super glue. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run that the whole way. Actually, now that I say that, I wonder if this is the gel, because this doesn't say anything about gel. Anyway, we're going to take that and we're going to run that the whole way around the outside, and we're going to use the baking soda trick to make sure that that glues nice and hard, but also the baking soda will give it a little bit of a texture, and that texture is going to help it to blend into the striations of our bark rock. So that is going to be next. The next step to getting this thing done was I put Black Magic Craft base coat over the whole thing. That's going to seal it all up so that it is all solid, but also it is going to give me a flat black base coat over the whole thing. For those that don't know, Black Magic Craft base coat is just a 50-50 mixture of matte Mod Podge and black acrylic craft paint. Once I got that done, I knew I was going to do my best possible paint scheme for this just to see what is possible. So the first thing that I did was I pulled out some just basic white acrylic paint, and I did that all over the rock. That's going to make my rock a solid white color all over. Then I'm going to use the leopard spotting technique to take 3 different colors, the more vibrant the better, to go all over the piece. And what I tried to do is do 1/4 of the piece in each color, which leaves one open area, which will be the white that was underneath. Now, I know what you're thinking. This now looks like the wall of a paintball arena after it had just gotten played by a bunch of amateur paintballers who had absolutely no aim. And that's okay, because from here, it's just going to keep looking better. All those bright colors are going to show up underneath, and it's going to look like the natural tones in the striations of the rock. This is, in my opinion, the best way to paint rock and make it look super realistic. So the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna tone all those bright colors down by putting a black wash over the whole thing. Let that dry, and then we're gonna start dry brushing up in grays. We're gonna start with a pewter gray. That's gonna be a wet over brushing of the whole thing, followed by an elephant gray. And then once we finish up with that elephant gray, getting our highlights, then we're gonna do one final edge highlighting of this tan, and it's going to go over the whole thing from top to bottom, so it's going to be simulating sunlight hitting the edges of the rock. So with that done, I'm going to throw a quick base job on this, and then what we're going to do is compare it to all our old rock versions and see which one we like the best. Okay, so I think this is my new favorite way to make rocks. I obviously fall in love with a lot of different types of crafting techniques, and that's just solely because I like crafting. So when I find a new way to make something, it always seems exciting and fun. So obviously I think the base job on this looks really, really good, and that can taint your opinion of what the rest of it looks like. But I'm really pleased with how this turned out. This compared to the foam, well, obviously the foam being super, super light, this wins just because it's a little bit heavier, although maybe for you, having the super light styrofoam rocks is better. I think you can get better, cool, like striations and stuff in the rock with the bark compared to the foam. But again, if lightness is what you're after, foam certainly is the winner. As far as the plaster rock goes, again, I don't think this is the best paint job ever, and I definitely know that this isn't the best basing job ever, but I think that they are pretty similar in their level of detail, but the weight is somewhere in between the foam and the plaster. The plaster is definitely heavier than the bark is. But this actually will lead me to what I think is the best about the bark that the plaster does not have. And that is the fact that with the plaster, even though this is one of my favorite versions of plaster rock painting that I've ever done, same technique as this, and one thing that's really nice about the plaster is that it soaks the paint up in a way that the bark did not. But with the plaster, I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but I'm definitely gonna put a close-up up on screen. Over time, it chips. Particularly if you're using these as gaming pieces, which is exactly what I use them for. They're not display models, they are gaming pieces. So people are gonna accidentally bump into them and they're accidentally going to nick a little bit here and there. With the plaster, it turns white when it nicks. Now time will tell with the bark, but what my instinct says is that as the paint chips away, underneath it is going to leave that original bark color, which to me, just leads to the final conclusion that I think that this bark is definitely my favorite way that I've ever made rocks. It definitely helps me to cut some corners, which is easier. I don't have to pour the plaster. It's definitely heavier weight and more rugged than the styrofoam is, although still styrofoam is certainly the fastest way to get tabletop ready rocks onto your table, other than just getting rocks out of your backyard and putting them onto your table, which is the easiest. But that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this content. And if you did, definitely do all of the YouTube stuff like subscribe to the channel, share this video with a friend that you think would enjoy it. Leave a comment down below of your favorite way to make rocks or what you think about the bark technique. The fact that it's free is always very nice. Like this video if you did, of course. And I think that's all I have for this week. So until next week, I'll be seeing you.